We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shipwrecked Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast on the We Made This podcast network. My name is Kurt North, and I am your host for this week's episode, the final episode of Series 4. With me, as always, is my co-host, Mark Adams. Mark, how have you been in the last 20 seconds?
I'm still good. Yeah,
Still
I'm
good,
still
yeah?
good.
Yeah.
I've got another rant for you, but you know, it must be a day with the letter Y in it.
Rant of the week. Well, you know, we've got two back-to-back. So joining us, as I mentioned, is Matt Latham. Matt, how are things going? Have you had your biscuits and are you ready to go again?
Yes, I've had, yes.
Yes,
I did notice that they were bourbons.
They were bourbons, chocolate bourbons.
Yes.
It.
Lovely.
Gel.
Chocolate bourbon or custard cream?
Chocolate bourbon.
All about the bourbon. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. How dare you insinuate otherwise?
I feel a bit sick.
I'm deeply offended, Kurt.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to reconsider this podcast.
Okay. Speaking of sick, Mother Teresa. Rant of the week.
Okay.
Let's get this out of the way
this is the
first.
rant of the week. Yeah, let's get it over with. We are aware of the controversies surrounding Mother Teresa. As someone who works as a humanist celebrant, it would be wrong of me to not acknowledge that. We know that she had billions of pounds in the institute based in the Vatican when she was spending fuck all on her hospitals. We know that she didn't give out many painkillers in her hospitals. We know that she forced deathbed baptisms on people. We know that she was a fanatic, a fundamentalist, and a fraud that borderlined on a cult leader. And we know that you can read about it all on Wikipedia. We also know that this wasn't public knowledge when this episode was written. So we don't like Mother Teresa, we don't like what she did, but it's not something that we feel we need to mention again as we continue with this episode of the podcast. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for Rant of the Week, Mark. It's
I'm going to hope that there's no more, because I don't want to be that guy.
I'm sure there will be more, but hopefully not in a weekly basis. And obviously, as I say, the show wouldn't have known that at the time, so
no.
It's all those kind of things. But we are here to talk about the Series 4, Episode 6, which was Meltdown, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, aired on the 21st of March 1991, and was directed by Ed Bye. And this one is a blatant rip-off of that Michael Crichton book, Waxworld. So, what are your first impressions, Matt, of this episode? What do you think of this episode?
Do you mean Westworld?
All right, okay, fair enough.
It's a good film, watch it. It's a very good film.
Westworld is a very good film, and Westworld, the TV show, is also a very good TV show. So,
I forgot there was a telly series.
Oh, it's
Is it good?
Yeah.
Mm.
That's 50% of you like it.
It thinks it's better than it is. It thinks it's more clever than it is when it's not. And sometimes it's too complex for its own good.
It is quite complex. We'll give you that, but I like it.
The film wasn't that complex. The film was basically wax dummies, but a bit like Jurassic Park.
Yeah, it's basically Jurassic Park, but with wax dummies, basically. Anyway, we're talking about this episode and
Meltdown,
Waxworld, whatever you want to call it. Matt, what are your impressions of this episode?
Meltdown, more like letdown. Am I right?
I'm guessing you're not a fan.
No, not really. I mentioned all the way back last week that I think, if you can remember that far back, that my opinion of Series 4 is probably the weakest that we've covered so far. And I completely had forgotten this episode existed until I watched it yesterday. And I can see why. It kind of loses itself, and there are some good ideas in it, but I think it's one of these concept episodes which just gets lost. I think lost in a sea of other concepts. I think it's one of these that just kind of gets like lost in the whole, unlike other better episodes to come. And yeah, I just, there was bits of it I just wasn't keen on. I didn't find it as funny as Dimension Jump. And yeah, I think there was I was watching it thinking, yeah, I can remember why this doesn't stick in the memory that much.
I think that there is an element of not necessarily unforgettableness, but this isn't the best of the episodes of this series and or Red Dwarf, but anything with as strong an anti-war stance as this episode has gets my seal of approval. So I'm more fond of it than perhaps the laughs that are in it would potentially give you. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I mean, this episode in itself got put back because of the 1991 Gulf War. It was meant to be one of the early episodes and got moved back to the end of the run.
Because it was so anti-war, yeah.
So it's interesting from that point of view. I would agree. I think that this episode is something that I struggle to remember when I do see it. I think I remember it more for the smeg-ups than I actually do for the episode. I think that's probably the fair assessment for me.
I think I would have had a similar kind of, oh shit, yeah, this is an episode kind of vibe to Matt if I hadn't studied the RPG sourcebook where wax droids were a character class that you could play in the Red Dwarf role-playing game. And that jogged my memory. Whereas if I hadn't looked at that book, I think it would have been as unforgettable for me as it had been for Matt.
I mean, talk about role-playing game. We open up with that, don't we? We open up with you rolled a 6 and a 2. So what
Risk is not a role-playing game. Risk is terrible. I'm into board games and I'm into role-playing games. And Risk is one of the dullest games. And this is one of those things that has aged well. Risk is still considered dull as fuck against most people who enjoy board games. And, you know, board games have become more sophisticated as we've, you know, progressed from 1991. But, yeah, everyone has also been the dullards sharing their stories when everyone is bored. Maybe not Risk, but I'm sure nobody wants to hear me talk forever about board games.
Yeah. But I think by very nature of the way that Rimmer's playing it and telling the story is it's quite humorous. I wouldn't say it's standout funny because it is kind of repetitive joke of like, you know, I've rolled a 6 and a 2 or I've rolled a 1 and a 1 or whatever it may well be. But it does give you that indication that they are still, you know, doing these type of things, that there is that story element to, you know, that Rimmer has this innate ability to make something really, really dull, and he will not let go of that dullness. He still wants to finish the story. He still wants to talk about it.
It resonates really quite hard with me because I am a board gamer, but everybody has something that they are nerdy about that they forget other people don't have knowledge about when they talk. So if you're a fan of Risk, you'll know exactly what a 6 and a 3 means. But if you're not a fan of Risk, and someone tells you I rolled a 6 and a 3, you need more context. But everybody has their nerd fanboy something that they will be that dullard. And it's obviously hyper-emphasised here, but I've definitely been that guy. Maybe even about Red Dwarf.
It's highly possible. Matt, what do you think you bore the most out of people when you start talking? Do you think when people just eye roll at you, going, "Matt's mad"?
Do we have time?
Did you roll a 6 and a 3?
I don't know. I assume I'm the most interesting person in the world. So. So this either means I've got a very high opinion of myself, or there are so many that I can't pick.
I think for me on stuff like this, I am aware enough of my own ability to do what Rimmer did here that when someone starts to do it, I will butt in and I will say, what's a quantum nebulizer? If someone's talking about whatever involves quantum nebulization or whatever. Perfect example is Colin. He's big into music, and he is a fascinating man to listen to, but he sometimes uses jargon, and I'll just poke him and say, what the fuck's a oobry-doobry riff of oobry-doobry? And then he'll explain it to me. What is an arpeggio? Well, I know what an arpeggio is, but you know what I mean? And he can quite easily elaborate when I need him to. And I think the difference there is that I am interested in what Colin has got to say, but I certainly wouldn't, and I'm a board gamer, I certainly wouldn't be interested in someone's fucking Risk game.
It's probably work-related stuff with me, I think. So...
Yeah.
Yeah, the work, yeah, that's like, it's, yeah, because I work in IT support. So, yeah. One of my favourite things to do is to make people regret asking me what was wrong with it when I fix a problem. Because, and I'm like, do you really want to know?
I really want to know now. I really want to hear a story.
I bloody don't. I'll just sit there going, huh? IT is not my thing.
To be fair, the equivalencies are like, yeah, it'd be like someone opening up a car bonnet and going, "That's an engine," and I'll just look at it going, "All right, so is that the Fluby Dooby? What's it?"
Yeah.
That's the alternator.
Ah, okay.
So
yeah,
now we're talking.
I know the big thing's called the engine. I know where I put the water in to redo me window wipers, but other than that.
That's greenwash, but dear.
It's greenwash, yeah. Oh, and the dipsticks for the oil level. But
yeah,
other than that, I feel like a real thicko when people start talking about cars. I'm like,
I had that recently. We had a lunch date just before Christmas, socially distanced, of course. And I was having a conversation with a colleague, and they started talking about their Audi and stuff like that. And someone else joined us. And then they both started talking about cars, and I'm just sitting there going, well, this is exciting, isn't it? I was so bored. They were just like trying to, I've got this Audi, such and such. Oh, I've got this car, and I've got that car, and I've got this. And I was like, I've had this one before in the past. I was like, yeah, I've had a Ford Focus or a Vauxhall Astra. That's basically it. I don't care. It gets me from A to B.
My car's red.
It goes vroom when you put...
It does. You do it. You turn the key and it goes brum. But I called out an AA guy for something not so long ago, and you know how you do with someone you don't know. You try and make conversation about something that you kind of grasp that you know about them.
Yeah.
And so I asked him a question, and fucking hell, I did not want the answer. you know, car was brooked. That's all I needed to know. Can you fix it? But I asked him a question out of pure uncomfortableness. And I got like a 5-minute lecture, and I was like, well, you brought it on yourself.
There's a moment in Parks and Recreation where the character Ron Swanson gets approached by someone in a store, and he turns around in a hardware store and he goes, "I know more than you," and then walks off. And the amount of times I have wanted to say that to people in bloody PC world. And so do you want this? Do you want the, like, if I got with a family member who was trying to buy a laptop, he goes, "No, you don't need this." "Oh yes, but you need this." And I went, "They don't. They can just go on. They can go on to so and so and get a free version, which will last them a lifetime." Yes, yeah. But it goes, no. Trust me, they don't need to spend that money on it.
Yeah, I've had the same. I was buying some musical speakers, a well-known make, and they were adamant I needed another device for it to work. And I was like, "No, you don't. You connect this network cable into the back of this device, and you plug it straight into your router, and that negates the necessity for a bridge, sir." And he's going, "No, you don't. You need this." And I was like, "I know what I'm talking about," and he's just wouldn't accept it, because he's obviously been trained to say, "You need this if you buy this." It's like, "No, you don't." He says, "I'm really concerned about that, because if somebody comes in and asks for that box, you're going to sell them something that's worth 300 quid when they don't necessarily need it. You should learn." It's like, they were like, "No, it won't work, it won't work." I said, "It's sitting at home working now." I said, "I can do it on my phone now. I can show you it working." And they just wouldn't have it, which was amazing. But anyway, talking about doobie-dars, we've got this lovely little device, this little device that can, within 500, I think it's 500,000 light years, I think it is, that can it can find the nearest planet with a breathable atmosphere. But Crichton seems to just want to use it to jump around the quarters. I mean, what did you make of this little concept and this little MacGuffin here?
I think it's a comment on science, isn't it? That people have an idea for something that they see as fun, but then they don't realise the serious implications of what it could actually be used for. Isn't that what the Nobel Peace Prize is based around? The guy who invented dynamite was mortified what it was fucking used for.
Isn't that the plot of Jurassic Park as well?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good point, well made. More Jurassic Park. I bloody love Jurassic Park.
It's almost as if, it was written by someone called Michael Crichton.
I want a teleporter, Kurt. I want one.
Do you
I want one of them.
Okay.
I want one.
Okay. Well, it does it to teleport various different... curious. Which is great. But it does lead us to Starbug. And when we're in Starbug, there's still ramifications of the Risk game. But we find out that Rimmer's got a small presence. And this is the introduction of the said light bee. So we've now officially made it into canon. And what do you think to the light bee overall? Because by the end of the episode, Rimmer's going on a little journey, isn't he?
So this was the first time we see the concept of the light beam.
Yes.
So, because the whole concept of soft light isn't mentioned yet until, is it Legion? I think,
or is Legion? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's pretty much. I think at the moment it's just there for a sight gag, and to allow. I think it's just so that they have a way of allowing Rimmer to be transported because there's a physical presence there. Whereas, like in the past, it's just been this beam of light projected across the ship. So yeah, and it's like the understanding of how. To bring up Star Trek Voyager, like originally the Doctor can only go into like one sick bay and the holodecks because they're the only things with the emitters allowing to project holograms. And my understanding was that Red Dwarf was full of them, so that which meant that as well as Starbug, they can do this. But then when he's off planet, something that wouldn't explain why he was everywhere. So. It's nice for him to actually realise, hang on, we need to figure out a way of... Because someone's going to be nerdy enough to point out all this stuff.
Yeah, because he needs to be powered, and that often comes up that he does need to be powered, and often he'll get turned off, or there'll be a threat to turn him off.
Yes.
And the fact that you've still got to have him going places as well.
Yeah, which is a key part in an episode Mark hasn't watched yet. A very, very, very big part... of something that will take a long time for Mark to eventually watch.
Are we talking like the Promised Land that far away?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, it's a very the whole concept of him needing power is massive in the Promised Land. But I think it helps. I think it kind of helps them explain a few things, and it will lead them to the whole kind of hard light aspect.
The light bee is, in my head at least, such a quintessential part of the technology of Red Dwarf that I thought in my head canon that was wrong, that it was much, much earlier, like Series 2, maybe Series 3, perhaps, where the light bee was first introduced. And it was only on the rewatch that I realised how late it was. Because, and Colin talks about this as well, I have almost a weird skewed continuity in my head because of the order that I bought the VHSs. So I hadn't seen some of the series out of order. And maybe that's where that comes from. But I think it's also just that the light bee is so important in the kind of recognised tech of Red Dwarf that maybe that was also why I thought it was earlier.
I think it also helps explain the whole they can only have one hologram. Because
they've only got one light bee, yeah, good point. Yeah,
because they always said there wasn't enough power to do more than one hologram on Red Dwarf. And thinking about it, I'm like, well, if it was Star Trek science, it would mean that there would be emitters having to be installed everywhere across Red Dwarf. And Red Dwarf is, my understanding of Red Dwarf, it's like about 1,000 times bigger than Voyager. Apparently, it's supposed to be. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure.
5 miles.
So it's like Babylon 5 size.
Well, I don't know because I haven't watched Babylon 5. So
I think it's 5 miles. Yeah, because it's in the intro sequence, it's like 5 miles long. So which, think about it, is I can't get my head around that bit. So
it takes a while. It takes a while to go up all the flaws and stuff. We have discussed this on several occasions.
Yeah,
it's
but
actually...
I think if there was anything that probably would have served them well introducing earlier, it's a retcon that works. I think it's a retcon that kind of works, and it's one of the few retcons of Red Dwarf that doesn't immediately make you think, oh, hang on, but this happened. So I think it...
Is it fully a retcon? Is there any reason why he couldn't have had a light bee going on for all the previous episodes?
Me too.
Because they would have needed a second light bee. Good point, well made. All right, you win.
Because I had the power. The whole concept was them having enough power to generate two.
Shit, you're right. That's a shame. That is a retcon. Boo! Yeah. I thought they'd have got away with it, but they haven't. Well done, Matt. We don't care about retcons and stuff. And
to be fair, I never actually clicked until like about 2 seconds ago, where I realised, because shit, I'm gonna piss on his chips in a second when they say to me.
No, please piss on my chips. I don't want like kind of flame wars on Twitter.
But now it's a good idea. It's a good device, and I think it's kind of pivotal, and it just helps them explain a lot, and helps them for a good gag at the end.
The gag at the end. All I'll say about it is could you imagine going through the intestines of Dave Lister, Mark? That's all I'll ask you.
Well, the gag at the end, I tell you what, Dave Lister's gag reflex is impressive, and I'm trying to avoid the actual question.
1.
I'm trying to avoid the question. It's not something I'd fancy. But again, it's interesting that would Rimmer be aware of it inside the light bee?
Well, you heard him talking in the beginning, didn't you? During the actual, when the light bee was thing, it was like, you could actually hear him. So he is in some form aware.
It's not on my priority list of things I'd like to do, I'll be honest. What about you?
No. Curries, Vindaloos, lagers.
Beer milkshake.
All the crappy drinks and eats. No. It would be quite a slurry fest, actually, I think.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Anyway, so we... So they do decide to go and check it out. The cowardness has already been taken into account because of the light bee, which I quite like the fact that, Crichton even, and go through the whole cast if I want. Crichton just sort of goes, "Oh, we've already taken into account, sir," which I thought was brilliant. The fact that they're that much of a crew now that they know what's going to happen. And we end up in a field near Shepperton Studios. What I will say about this episode is that the money's not really there to really make this a good episode, is it really? Don't get me wrong, and we will allude to the fact that Mark Adams got mentioned on the commentary for Whitehall because he knew where the footage was from the Japanese film Gappa.
Well, that was because I researched my notes for this episode. It was pure fucking luck. And I'm into that kind of thing. I do like Toho monsters. And you could tell the difference in the footage quality, which is why I looked it up. And you're right, it's from Gappa the Triphibian Monster. And that particular film is available in its entirety on YouTube. I call Shipwrecked and Comatose special. Anybody in?
Have you watched it already?
Yes, but do you want to watch it again and watch it with me and then talk about it on a podcast?
It's a special. I might step out of that one, Mark.
Don't matter, Colin's going to do it, so you don't have to come.
I've got my veto. I've got my special veto.
I think there's Colin and Carl have already said yes, so I mean, you're both more than welcome if you want to watch dumbass films with us.
But yeah, I mean, I actually quite like that. To be fair, I like the as I say, I love sometimes the sheer stupidness of it, and the fact that they've used that Gappa film, I think, is really good.
From 1967, that film.
Yeah. But
That footage was that old already.
Going into some of the aspects of this episode where you actually see the 3-bedroom houses that are around just sitting there. You can tell it's like an outhouse by the side of the wall when they're looking at Gandhi. You know, it's just like, oh my God.
It's wonderful. I don't care that Red Dwarf's got shonky bits around the edges. It's just, that's part of his charm, Kurt.
Oh yeah, I'm not denying that. I'm not denying. I just think that particular thing's quite interesting.
That said, though, I think this episode's got a lot of ambition in it. It's quite epic in comparison to other stuff. I mean, this was originally supposed to be the opener, wasn't it?
Yes.
So I can kind of see them. This is their attempt at doing another backwards, where they've got a lot of on location shooting, a decent size guest cast. So it has that kind of appeal to it.
And footage from a monster film from 1967.
That was what backwards was missing.
Yeah.
yeah, that would be great. But we end up in the unit where a certain Adolf Hitler is.
They do like Hitler, don't they? Maybe not like, but they like to use Hitler.
They do. Hitler, the Goerings.
Goering's a transvestite again?
Yeah.
That's a running gag about Goering being a transvestite, even though there is no historical proof.
And one of my favourite smeg-ups of all time, is during this scene where one just during the actual episode itself when Lister and the cat end up in there, and they end up the first gag is that they end up on the table, because a different camera angle is enough to like sort of go, oh, they're there. And then the second one being in the chimney. Do you remember? Have you seen the smeg-ups, Matt? No. Okay, so during the chimney scene, what happens is like sort of Lister like turns his lighter up, and he goes, "Oh, look at this stone." And he knocks on the wall, but it's like obviously just MDF that's being built as a set. And
yes, I remember now.
And the audience just absolutely fall about laughing. And because then all you get is like Craig Charles going to the audience going, "They were going to sort that out in the dub." Which is brilliant, but it's a brilliant gag in itself within the episode, though, Mark, isn't it?
It's one. I loved it. That just, yeah. Sometimes I think my love of the smeg-ups more than anything is part of a really important part of my love of Red Dwarf. And you do what you just kind of talked about is you see these scenes and you remember the smeg-ups, and it kind of almost takes you out.
Yeah.
Of the story, because you remember these iconic smeg-ups like the you just described.
They use a lot of lookalikes, and they actually use an agency for this. And Elvis one is particularly interesting, Clayton Mark. But what do you think to the lookalikes that they use for this, and the likes of Hitler and Goering's, and obviously the other side as well?
I think they're pretty much on par. I think because I think they've used kind of very kind of specific people that with a specific look. So you can kind of, I think it's so that they don't have to waste time in going like with the cat going, "Who's that?" Well, that, and then Lister going, "Well, that's Marilyn Monroe. She was blah 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 blah. Who's that? That's Albert Einstein. He did this and this." They kind of trust the intelligence of the audience to realise who they're talking about. The only one that I struggled with is that I can't tell if it was one of Laurel and Hardy.
Was Stan Laurel?
Was it Stan Laurel?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking it was him, but I couldn't be sure. I thought it was a really crap Charlie Chaplin one at first. It didn't have the moustache. But then, like when he was starting being really curly, I'm like, okay, let's see. That's one of Laurel and Hardy. I can never remember who's who.
Right. Okay. But they talk about the Pythagoras, and so it's all about triangles. Einstein's triangles. Which I like the fact that even to the point of the gag where it says like, there's only 20 left. It's a shame there's not 21 because we can make a triangle.
The characters that they use, I really think that they're a lot of fun because they can mock these historical figures gently and harmlessly. It reminded me a little bit of the historical figures in Bill and Ted.
Yes.
And there is nothing wrong with that. I don't care. I don't know which one came first. I'm not going to look it up. They were both brilliant. Move on.
Bill and Ted.
Did it? Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, 89. But I think with Bill, particularly with Bill and Ted, I think there was a mocking, but they never really. I think there was almost a kind of respect to the majority of them. They never really set out to really take the piss out of them, apart from the ones that perhaps needed to. So, like when you have Napoleon, because Napoleon was like a ruthless dictator, they just made him into a figure of fun to laugh at. Whereas then when they have Abraham Lincoln come in, but they treat Abraham Lincoln with the kind of reverence that I think Americans do have for him in general and stuff. Whereas I think being British, we're a lot more cynical. a lot more cynical towards certain people, which is why you can probably get away with having one of the few more respected monarchs that we've had walk into a room and start and shoot Hitler in the back.
Really?
Yeah. I can't think of any other monarch apart from Victoria who you probably would have gotten away with a Tommy gun.
Victoria was badass, that's for sure.
They also used Elvis Presley. The lookalike himself, Clayton Mark, actually brought his own costume in. And,
Brilliant.
And some of his lines were actually lines that he put in himself, that they let him go along with that. They did have a number of different people in mind. They did have an Elvis impersonator who couldn't do the American accent and couldn't sing. So it was like, what's the point in that? Well, maybe not couldn't sing, but it's like, okay then. And there's a lot of talking in the actual episode as well. So they wanted someone that could do that. And obviously, it's for the second week in a row, the end credits, we get a different end credits.
Yes.
Which is nice.
Yes. And I said last week how much I love that shit. I love playing with things like that. It's brilliant.
It's like when Blackadder, particularly the second one, used to have like different lyrics.
Yes.
Like with the Lord Flashheart. It was Lord Flashheart rather than the Blackadder theme and stuff. I like that. It's like when they make an effort to kind of do things differently rather than just being all formulaic and stuff.
Yeah.
I thought that was a lot of fun.
And apparently, so the Clayton Mark obviously has got a big part in it, and some of the stuff he comes out with, the way he moves and the way they use the Elvis as like a parody of Elvis and stuff. I think that really works because it is like, we imagine and have seen so many Elvis impersonations that just works well.
I think as well, when you think about it, I mean, it's a waxworks museum, so they're probably programmed with the very basic 2D representation of what the idea of those people were like. Yeah. So when you've got Elvis going, where do we go? When he swings his arm, goes, it's over there, but he does the arm swing. So it's, I mean, like if it was actually Elvis Presley, he probably would have just gone, it's over there, mate. Yeah. Whereas like you've got the kind of the icon or the character of what Elvis represents as a waxwork. So like if you've got, I was thinking about it. Like say if Madame Tussauds came to life and you got people in there, they wouldn't be the actual people. They would probably just be the programmable kind of media representations.
Yeah,
like a caricature.
Yes, that's that. Yeah, caricature. That's the word I was forgetting existed.
I think the actor must have made quite the impression on the team because we covered this between Series 3 and Series 4. He was brought back for the video of Tongue Tied alongside the rest of the cast. So he was the only one that they... The choices of who they brought back was really odd. They brought back the guy who played Queeg. They brought back the guy who played Elvis. They brought back Norman Lovett. So both Hollies were in that. But if you're interested in that, go back and listen to our special on Tongue Tied.
That's an excellent plug. I don't think we've ever plugged a previous episode in an episode before. I think that's a new meta
I've developed.
Oh, I do it all the time on Pick a Disc.
We probably have.
I've been on Pick a Disc.
I've been on Pick a Disc.
Yeah, we've both been on Pick a Disc, haven't we, Kurt?
I've been on twice.
Oh.
I've
been on a few times as well. So,
I've been guest and I've been host. Anyway, we've also got Gandhi. Now, Gandhi's an interesting one in itself because apparently that they cast a lookalike for Gandhi. They saw him getting out of the car and went, "There's no way in hell's chance he's going to be able to do any push-ups. He can't get out the car." So they had to get him recast, and the person they recast wasn't that much younger than him. So, but for the gag, it works. But it's just interesting that they were like, "No, that's not going to work. We need a new casting member."
There is a very interesting. I can't remember the exact people that complained, but the representation of Gandhi in places can get a lot of stick. Now, I've never watched it, but I've always wanted to because it sounds pretty cool. There was an animated series created by Lord and Miller called Clone High.
Clone High is brilliant.
I want to see it because it looks amazing. It looks like something I love, but I've never got a chance around to see it. So, but for the first season, Gandhi was represented. My understanding was that he was represented as kind of like the horny teenage sidekick.
Yeah,
is that correct? Yeah. They got a lot of stick and controversy
I can
over
see
that.
Why?
So it's not nowhere near this. It's a lot more further than Red Dwarf, but there is kind of, if you misinterpret Mahatma Gandhi, then there are like, I don't know whether it was the Indian government. I can't remember who raised the fuss, but like you kind of, if you have Gandhi, you have to kind of treat him with a certain level of respect, else they'll gun for you.
But yeah, so the character obviously got changed because, well, not the character, the lookalike got changed because he just wasn't physically able to get down and do a push-up, really. One gag that always escapes me is the Santa Claus one. It's not. I always seem to forget that was there. It says, "Oh, they've come in from fiction land."
I think they could have overdone it with fictional characters, which is why Santa Claus stuck out so well and looked as incongruous as he did. I thought that was well done, because you could have gone over the top and had, I don't know, Gandalf and whoever else as
It's also public domain. So like if you suddenly thought, oh yeah, let's bring Luke Skywalker in, then you're gonna have Lucasfilm back then kind of go, ooh, okay, what are you doing there?
Good point, well made.
Okay, we've mentioned that company twice in 2 episodes now. If we mention it a third time, we're in danger of getting sued.
Is that right?
So let's maybe not mention it next week.
Right.
Even though, not next week, next major episode, which is about a holoship.
Oh, that'd be yeah.
Shit.
I wonder if they've got light beams on holoship. Anyway.
Well, no, the whole holoship is hollow, isn't it? The whole thing.
Well, I'll find out when I watch it.
Yeah, I don't know who's on that with us, but we'll find out next season. So just one thing, Noel Coward is there as well, and not necessarily for Noel, but Rimmer and his. I think we can talk about his psychological kind of thing here, because we'll talk about it as a whole. This is the beginning when he says "shut up" and starts like sort of becoming the very thing. Because even like sort of when he realizes in the episode where he's like, "My God, this is my calling. This is what I've been waiting for all my life," and he lets it run rip. You know, it's a typical Rimmer thing to do. The fact that he just gets so wrapped up in this idea of commanding an army. What do you think? I think that for me probably holds the episode together, because it's like a look on Rimmer.
Agreed, I think, yeah. I mean, I think, again, coming off the back of Dimension Jump, where you kind of had like the extreme elements of Rimmer's psychology. Yeah, this is kind of like him trying to find something that he always thought he was good at. which was basically playing general, but then never actually having that in practice. So, I mean, he's structured. I mean, like, in a way, this is very similar to. It's a shortened down version of how series 1 and series 2 did, where you'd have like a kind of bunk scene leading on to events, and it will pay off later on. So, like, I think because of the scope of series 4 and series 3, you kind of don't realise that the conversation about risk was them doing a very series 1, series 2 thing of setting up something in a conversation between Lister and Rimmer that plays off later on. But then also, I think you've also got a more long-term character development of Rimmer kind of always wanting to be that kind of general of an army, because like, if you go back to Better Than Life, one of his favourite people, one of his heroes is Napoleon, and he goes, "You are one of my most favourite European dictator." So it's kind of natural that he'd immediately get into this, but then also be in a position where he knows there is no one there to really outrank him. Now, if it was an actual army with actual soldiers, right, he'd have no authority, no one would listen to him. But now he knows he's kind of he's more or less playing with wax figures on a board. So he's able to kind of live the dream without any of the consequences.
It's a strong metaphor. I agree. I think as someone who is naturally disposed to dislike stereotypes, it was difficult for me to dislike this one. Because military leaders, as people of privilege who gets the job rather than earning it, they get they are a lord or whatever, and they get the job because of who they are rather than their ability, is something that we have seen in history. And also the kind of brutality and the treating people like, I suppose, treating people like pencils in a stationery cabinet rather than human beings. It's all very almost tropey when it comes to military leaders in television. But anything critical of war and the kind of knobheads who take people to war is good by me.
You just mentioned the word privilege, and that's just giving me thought in that she talked about how people are kind of given roles rather than earning
exactly
them.
Right.
Yeah. So the Rimmer family. Now I can't remember off the top of my head whether the Rimmer family, because we know that all of his brothers have been a lot more successful in the past and gone onto high-ranking places. Now, I can't remember if it's because they were actually competent and showed they were...
They were sent to better schools than Rimmer by his family, I think was the general gist.
So the idea being is that, like, Howard and all his other brothers kind of earned their way into the positions of leadership.
With the advantage of going to a better school, but yes.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting that Rimmer could theoretically be an example of the people of who they are being put into positions now. So, like, if things are lined up, because Rimmer would be the kind of joke of the family, he theoretically could have been put in a position. He could in a position where he's got some authority, but he can't actually do anything by his brothers if things had turned out different ways. He could have been, he would have been like the David Brent of a certain department or something, where he's got responsibility but not really. Yeah. And again, it's not expanded on. I don't think the intent's there, but it's an interesting idea that, like, Rimmer could be kind of like an example of character that you could use to kind of make fun of the fact that people can just be put in because of who they are. Whereas, but the twist being is that he's put in there because every other person in his family is actually competent. Whereas, like, we've seen in real life where, like, you've got people, like a whole group of people, a group of family that are either politicians or people who are in the army or something, who just have no bugger all what they're doing, are put in positions that they've got no control of.
Absolutely right.
Cough died out Harding, cough.
And he's, it is quite obvious that Rimmer is satirizing military leaders of the past that were completely and utterly kind of at a distance of what they were doing. He's just stupid and callous and insensitive and incredibly bloodthirsty. And when you think about what people did in World War One, where these people were just numbers, get over the top, and you think about the way Napoleon, yeah, he had lots of military success, but shit a brick the amount of people that died on his watch. I think it's incredibly well done, even if it could be argued that it's a stereotype.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it even just the way that it's like Rimmer's still asking to go to the battlefield after there's nobody left on either side. There's literally nobody left, and that's when Rimmer Lister obviously kind of portrays the all really Alice Smeghead Rimmer, aren't you know, and it really kind of like again it goes back to what we were talking about last week with characters being over-egged for comedic value. This is being done slightly differently to have a comment on the war. It's because it seems to be like, there's like this idea that, they would still go and regale in the fine battle that we've had. We've beaten everyone. Everything's happened. Let's go and regale in that. Let's go and have a glass of champagne on the battlefield. I think the difference with that one though is that, and not to rehash the more serious stuff we talked about last time, is that I think this episode kind of makes a much more explicit, is explicit intent to criticise the values and ideas that Rimmer is having now in terms of his kind of bloodthirst for war and stuff. Whereas, but I think that was more intent. Whereas the inverted positive wasn't aware of what they could have been doing last week. This week, it's a lot more explicit and. Well, he says they're only wax droids, and you could quite easily replace wax droids with people from the mines, or commoners, or the lower classes, or fucking hell, or black people, anything where there's a military leader that has desensitized themselves, and they're treating people like, well, let's go back to Risk, like characters on a board game. Yeah, which is exactly the kind of analogy they're going for, isn't it?
I think, and I don't think there probably wasn't time in the script, but there was a bit where Lister goes, but they've broken their programming, they're sentient, they deserve life and stuff. And I'm quite surprised no one's made, like even Crichton never made the comparison to himself breaking programming and being sentient. Yeah. So I mean, but. Again, it's not a Lister episode, but again, I quite like the fact that it's showing the differences of opinion with Lister and Rimmer in that. Okay, yeah. So you've got probably one of the more. Well, he's literally the last empathic person on the world, but he's probably the most empathic person in the universe.
Yeah.
Who's coincidentally is a slob where you got the most anally clean. Person is there. I
think that you mentioned you're right. The fact that you've got things like talking about sentience and stuff like that, which only briefly touched upon. But there is danger of like going over that trope time and time again. So I understand probably where they've came from with it. It's always in the back of the mind that we need to maybe allude to.
It's a favourite, isn't it? They do like the whole AI sentience conversation on Red Dwarf. We've spotted that over the last 3 series, and I don't expect it to go anywhere.
It's also their way of being able to say it's not aliens. Because I think the biggest thing is no alien.
Yeah.
No aliens.
And then there doesn't seem to be a kind of huge deal on the sentience of Gelfs. They're accepted as people, even though they are genetically engineered. Whereas the focus on robotic sentience is something that they do in Red Dwarf. And I wonder why it's... What's the difference between something made of metal and something made out of genetic engineering?
I think, if you think about it, I mean... the closest analogy I can think of the present day is perhaps test tube babies.
Or clones.
Or clones, where like you've got people who are basically human, they're basically human people, human lives, basically they're people. Like they deserve life and stuff, whereas with robotics they were built with a certain purpose, and then which then but then you get to a certain point of what makes a person in terms of the usual tropes and stuff. So I think Gelfs, I think, are pretty much kind of like the cat species, where they're actually probably a certain species, but they're perhaps a subspecies or an evolution of human. Or what evolved from humans as well. So I think, so sometimes I keep forgetting we're actually 3 million years in the future of evolution, and perhaps Gelfs were more clones of humans in the past that are just mutated because they weren't originally part of the human race. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that I do think there's some kind of almost acknowledgement that flesh is more valuable than machine, even though they're both technically made in a lab, I suppose. And that's interesting. And I think that does reflect the thoughts of society on the value of, I just find I've always found the AI sentience thing fascinating, but I've never thought about it alongside the idea of evolved cats. Should they be treated as exactly the same as people? These Gelfs, should they be treated this exact same as people? And I don't believe in the soul, so that shouldn't really be a huge deal to me, yet it still is.
I don't know. Maybe because the idea of something that's like a being that's been that has their organic components and the brain and whatever that with regards to like AI, sentient AI and whatever, that is designed, and it's just a breaking of the design to like formulate that. It's more understandable for us from a biological entity to understand that more than you would do for a.
That's probably fair. Yeah, I think that's where it comes from. And
what another layer of it I just thought of as well is that concept of the whole kind of sentience of AI is also hard coded in how Lister and Rimmer both relate to Crichton, because Rimmer constantly and throughout the series always thinks of Crichton as basically a slightly intelligent can opener, whereas Lister is actively interacting with him as a friend and as a person.
True.
And what I find quite interesting as well is that when you think about it, Rimmer is just a piece of technology.
Yeah.
He's no longer human. He's probably, I mean, say, Mark, you don't believe in the soul. But if it could be an analogy, it could be a metaphor for someone's soul placed into technology. And just thinking about it, I find it quite funny that the most technophobic character is a piece of technology himself.
And it's something that sci-fi talks about, throughout the ages, and something like that. That exact thing is what Star Trek Picard's gone through.
Yeah.
On this season. So on the first season. So to play with that is going to be interesting in that show itself. Something I wanted to touch upon as well is the potentially a remake of this scene where we get Winnie the Pooh. Poor bastard.
I think the idea of Santa Claus being an easy win, like Matt said before, as a physical character, gives us the option of an off-screen death of something that they just simply couldn't afford to do. It could have been Winnie the Pooh. It could have been Rick from Rick and Morty. Or, you know what I mean? It could have been anyone that would have been more difficult to realise than Santa. And it works because nobody wants to think about a firing squad and Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
It's strange that Winnie the Pooh does get a lot of grief from this, though, because it's happened on was it South Park?
That's because South Park played on an internet meme that was going around Twitter saying that, I think is it President C? I'm not sure how it's pronounced. It's spelled XI, and pretty much Twitter was saying, "Oh, he looks a lot like Winnie the Pooh," and started putting pictures of the Chinese president next to photos of Winnie the Pooh.
Right,
and that's the set, and that's when South Park got involved. Now, I don't think I've seen the episode in question, but I'm pretty sure they portrayed the leader of China as Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think
South Park. We whine about some of the problematic shit in Red Dwarf. There's a bit of a difference in the way South Park do their shit.
I think South Park has an air of deliberation between it. So,
well, they do. It's graphic. Put it this way: Winnie the Pooh's death scenes are graphic. So it's. I always remember that on obviously post watching that compared to this. But I like it. I actually do like, you mentioned about the Santa Claus thing to give you that idea of it. But the way that obviously Lister explains it, you can actually see it in your own head, and I think that's more effective. The fact that you've got the some of the absolute atrocities that that side in history, general history, would do. You've got the firing squads. You've got all the things that will draw up with everything, which we won't go into now, but there's a lot of heinous, horrible things that's happened in Earth's history, and then to use Winnie the Pooh as your death to firing squad is horrific.
Absolutely,
and the way that Craig Charles plays it is brilliant, and I just love the way his reaction says no one should ever see that, and that's obviously the gag we don't. But also within that scene that we'll talk about calligrapher in a minute, but is. Cats like sort of oh no, they'll torture us. It's all right, you can tell us.
That's a good gag.
I think Cat's brilliant.
This isn't one of the funniest episodes of Red Dwarf, but that's a good gag. I enjoyed that immensely.
Yeah, it is wonderful. I just think it's just way it's something that they'll play around with more with Crichton.
Yes.
We're using that high pitch, like, oh no, kind of stuff, which I think is marvellous. I think it's wonderful. And then we get to the good old Tony Hawk scene.
And I think it's pretty much the case that whenever he's on screen, he kind of embraces the fact he's got screen time. Because I think he can be often overlooked. And I think he's more or less, in either case, he's like, should be there alongside like how Hattie Haybridge and Norman Lovett are classed as core Red Dwarf cast members, even though they're not in every series. I think Tony Hawk should be part of that. But so I'm just wondering whether there's kind of anything kind of too much fun he had slapping Craig Charles as well.
Yeah.
Well, he was really nervous. He was really nervous about doing it.
Okay.
So
I thought he would have enjoyed it.
So. Well, no, he said it. He said in the interview, and I've seen it on in my research as well, that because he'd been like he'd been behind the scenes or done wherever. He was like, I'm really conscious that I've got to slap Craig Charles quite a lot, and having to deliver the lines at the same time, and to actually physically do it. It's one of those where you're going on stage, and all of a sudden you get you might know the words, but then 2 minutes before you go on stage, you go, oh shit, I don't remember anything, and muscle memory normally takes over, and that's what happened in this instance. He was like, the muscle memory kind of took over, and as it happened, it was Craig Charles who was actually the one that was actually causing the problems, because every time he got slapped, it was him trying to hold it together. The fact that Craig Charles was trying to hold it together, because like, stop it, because that last one, you do see Craig Charles just a micro little inflection where he's like that. You just see him about to go off on one.
I'm pretty sure it's either a Smeg Up or there was a clip of a Smeg Up in the 3 Million Years documentaries that we watched.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there was a bit where they showed that, and then Craig Charles just kept laughing. Now, I can't remember if that was in a Smeg Up I've seen, or it might have been in that documentary. But yeah, you can kind of see, but you can kind of see where he just keeps breaking and going, shut, just turning to Danny John Jules and going, shut up, and just burst out laughing.
Think to some extent, if you are the guy who smegs it up and it involves you getting slapped again, okay, that's your fault. I can understand Tony Hawk's kind of trepidation of ballsing it up, because it's not him that's going to get slapped if he ballses it up. So, yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
So it was it's quite a nervous thing for them to do. Rasputin obviously is around as well, and there's a whole line on that, and the fact that they end up in the cupboard, which I thought was quite funny. But so that was good. And then we get to the kind of the final battle scene, with the explosions and stuff, which to this day I still find quite funny, but in a way, like I don't know if it is meant to be that way, but it's like the still camera, the explosion, and it's obviously being cut, and you can see the jump cut of the explosions.
When was this? This was 1991. When was Blackadder Goes Forth?
1989.
So this was after Goes Forth?
No, yeah, this was
it was after.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This was after, because 28th of September to the 2nd of November 1989.
Good grief, then they've got no excuse, because Blackadder did it with so much more sensitivity and so much better, and they didn't play death for laughs. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, if this was before Blackadder, then I would have thought, okay, benefit of the doubt. I think the joke's supposed to be much more on Rimmer rather than the actual people going over the top. Yeah. And they're not actually human people. They are waxwork. They're not actually live soldiers. They're just waxworks. But I don't know. Yeah, I think there's a bit of.
Well, the fact that even Rimmer goes to the battle scene itself to view what he's doing, I think in itself it's more of a play on his psychological mind of actually being there, on the bike and things like that. It's almost like, I'm the master and commander and chief, and I'm the one that's going to oversee this and watch this happen, kind of thing. Whereas, like, Blackadder has to deal with this because Blackadder's whole concept was that time and what happened, and that's the only way you could go out. Whereas this one, as I say, is played for laughs, but it's a different concept. It's a different psychological mindset as well. It's
brutal, and the scene with Mother Teresa and the Nazis was, I don't know. They said clitoris in an episode and it gave it a 15 rating. All this death and it didn't get a 15 rating. I question, personally, what people are looking at in the BBFC at this time.
I think it goes to that desensitization, doesn't it? I think that people, it's one. I don't know, because it is figures that you people that know, and I suppose they're trying to get across. They make no allusion to the fact that they are waxworks.
Oh yeah, the message is strong. It's just how explicit this is compared to a word that describes a part of the female genitals. I just think the priorities are skewed, personally.
It is quite a strong one. I mean, obviously, we get the... we mentioned Victoria coming to the end and gunning down Hitler and the like. And we get to swallow the light beer, and that comes to the end of the episode. So is there anything that you want to bring up in your notes that I will have missed at all? Anything you want to bring up?
Did you notice that the cuts were different because they weren't on Red Dwarf?
Yes.
And as a concept, I really like that idea. I think nice effort making a conscious decision that, they're not on Red Dwarf, we'll do the cuts differently. I just didn't like them as much. Yeah,
there's very weird, zooming pixelization. Yeah.
It's a nice touch, and it could be argued as a interesting attention to detail. But you look at something like Star Wars now, they're still doing the cuts from the 70s and 80s, but that's an homage. That's a acknowledgement of the history, and it's
part of the aesthetic,
right.
I think.
Whereas this just kind of stuck out a bit.
Well, it's playing on that game, kind of war game thing, isn't it? That's what it's trying to portray.
Go on.
Like, it's war games. That's the way it feels to me. It feels like, because we've got that kind of tumbling around and the kind of the little drum beats of the drums and things like that. It just felt like it felt like it's trying to build an aesthetic around a war game.
Yeah, and you're right. It's thematic, and I don't know why it just didn't work for me, because it should have worked. You're right, but I don't know.
And I'm not quite. Are they trying to homage something in particular?
I wonder that too. Something that I don't know. I'm not into war films, I'll be honest, so I may have missed something.
I'm not too sure either.
It feels like it should. Because it seems to be when they flick between, as I say, the Star Wars wipe, where you're going from one side to the other, and is it meant to be alluding to the die or what? But I don't know. is quite a strange one. That's something that I wouldn't mind somebody mentioning to us and telling us, because that's what it feels like to me. It feels like it's like an homage to something, or it's just trying to portray this war game feel, because that's how it feels.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting one. It's a good point to put out there. Matt, anything else that you think you've got notes on as well?
No, I think the episode, again, it's like majority of series 4 for me, in that the occasional bit of comedic brilliance, but there wasn't as many of them as opposed to other episodes, and I just feel like I can just see that it's just not as memorable as other episodes. So yeah, this one's probably quite low down, and if I was to rank and list the episodes in order, this would be near the bottom, I think.
I think this is something I'm just thinking about now, Mark, is that we had Body Swap last season, and I know we've been saying that season 4 so far has been strong, and this is what before we really talked about this one. And I would say this is probably the same, Matt. Definitely. I think it would definitely be towards the bottom of this one. But this is probably the second dud that we've had in the run, I would say. It's the one I remember more, as I say, at the top of the hour. It's the one I remember more for the smeg ups. Like there's within this, there's a couple of scenes where Rimmer says something and he says, "Oh, screwed up the line." And he also does some Kenneth Williams impressions in the costume, and he does, and he does a couple of impressions during the actual outtakes. So I remember it more for that, and I think that's why I remember the episode more. But I would say that this is probably, out of what we've seen so far, this is probably the second bottom. I don't know about you, Mark. What do you think?
I think describing any episode of Red Dwarf as a dud is perhaps a little unfair. I think a dud in comparison, yes, but I would still watch this over 100 other types of sitcom.
Yeah, Well, I'll put this out there. So the time is now the Millennium podcast that I do, right? Over the 3 seasons, I would generally rate things 6 till 10. 6 being, yeah, I enjoyed that, it was good. And I've rated one episode 2 out of 10. I wouldn't, again, with Red Dwarf, if I was rating this out of 10, I would say it's probably around a 6. It's good. I enjoy it. It's all right. It's still not, I'm not saying it's like a 2 out of 10. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's like a bad episode. But I think out of the pile that we've got, I think this would come, the second least favourite so far, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. It's still a fun episode that I'm a completionist. If I watch a series of Red Dwarf, I will watch the series. I won't cut out an episode that's less of a favourite. I will watch it all in one run. And then I'll go back and I'll watch it all again. And then I'll go back and I'll watch it all again. And then I'll go back and I'll watch it all again.
Dave. No, but you haven't completed Red Dwarf yet, Mark.
I haven't, no.
So then, final thoughts then on this episode is, I think we're all in agreement, I think.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine, and the anti-war stance sticks well with us.
So, at the end of the season, question I've got for two of you then. So, you two, I think you two preferred 4 to me in general, but then in terms of comparison to the other seasons, in comparison to the series, where would you, at the end of the season, where would you rank this with the other lot?
You want us to rank all 4 seasons, basically?
Yeah.
4, 2, 1, 3.
Definitely say 4. I might, I wouldn't say 3. I would maybe go 4, 2, 3, 1.
How about you, Matt?
2, 3, 1, 4.
Good grief.
I think I particularly rewatching it for this podcast, series 2 I think has actually stayed strong, and I don't think there's anything below. I think there's probably one episode that's an 8, but everything's 9 or 10s in the series 2 for me. Yeah. So I think, 2's, that's why 2's the better one. I think it's like, it got the balance of what they tried to do with Series 1 before they got the money for the concepts.
Fair?
So that brings this episode to an end. So where can people find Mark online?
Okay, so I'm going to do a quick run through soon as it is the end of the series. If you want to follow me personally, you can on Twitter and Instagram, same ID, at MarkAdamsHC. If you want to have a look at my other podcasts, I have 3. I have one about the stories behind people's tattoos. That's called Ink Stories. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter for that one, at Ink Stories Pod. I have one based around my job as a humanist celebrant. That's called Life's Milestones, at Life's Milestones on Twitter. I also have one about kids telly, retro kids telly, and basically showing someone who has never seen my telly before my old kids telly and then returning the favour once every fortnight. That's called Right in the Childhood, at RITC Pod on Twitter. All of my podcasts are available on wherever you are listening to Shipwrecked and Comatose, so just search on your favourite podcast provider.
And Matt, where can people find you on that there Tinternet?
You can find me on social media. My personal one is Zanmat, or XandMatt, on Twitter and Instagram. And you can find Pick a Disc, where I speak to people about music and albums that they want to talk about. You can find me on all sorts of places that do podcasts and stuff. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook under Pick a Disc. Surprise, surprise.
Excellent stuff. And you can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. That's RMULDRAKE. I'm on the Star Trek Picard podcast, Make It So, which is at Jean-Luc Podard on Twitter. You can find me on the Xcast, which is the X-Files podcast, on the X_cast. I've just finished my Millennium podcast. That's pretty much a full wrapped up Millennium show from 1996 to 1999. You can find that at the Time Is Now pod. And you will have also seen that I did some of the, or most of the One Division on podcast 616. Well, that'll be well in advance now. We don't know where we are. We're probably on Loki season 3 now. So we'll see where we are. When
I might be leading on it by that point, Kurt, because I've kind of agreed to do Loki.
You might well. Yeah, you might well be on Loki. So that's podcast 616 on Twitter. So those are the best
I've
places
got too many podcasts. That might not age well. I might have dropped out.
Well, these things are a time capsule, aren't they? At the end of the day. But until next time, everyone, remember...
I haven't got something witty to say. Shit. Triangles!
Hello, everyone. This is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming. Elsewhere on We Made This. Cerebral Jukebox.
Yeah, I suppose there's something quite freeing about not knowing the words. So even if they're super dark, you just don't know. So you can because you can get like a lot of songs which have a really cheerful musical undertone, but the actual meaning is quite nasty. And you're like, ooh, this song is a bit much, really. But I suppose with songs that you don't know the actual meanings of, it just sort of remains it with its like innocent musical intention. I mean, obviously, Feliz Navidad is going to be a happy song. It's a Christmas song.
Right in the childhood.
So, Fraser, have you heard of Round the Twist?
I have not, and the only reason I've done that Australian accent is because I think you mentioned it last time that it was an Australian show.
I did.
So that's all I've got.
So it's an Australian show from the early 90s.
It's not like Home and Away or Neighbours.
I mean, it has the same accents.
I think I can say the same actors.
There might be, I don't remember.
They just do the same three shows over
Wouldn't
and
it be
over again.
funny if Harold Bishop turned up?
I was going to say like Chris Hemsworth or like one of them.
Was Chris Hemsworth in Neighbours?
Yeah.
Was he?
I think Margot Robbie was as well.
Really? Kylie Minogue?
Yeah.
But the thing is, it will be Kylie Minogue era. So it'll be Kylie Minogue, Jason Donovan, Stephen Dennis, Craig McLachlan, all of these.
The time is now. A Millennium podcast.
To watch Millennium. And again, this is
just to stress this, by the way, I was 18 at the time, so I'm just going to say that. Yeah, okay. So.
I know. And were you a Kiss fan, Kurt?
I was a rock fan. I don't think I was a Kiss fan, no.
Yeah, because this is exactly the situation that you're in, where you're talking about like middle-aged men in suits in Hollywood who are trying to project what kids want from their entertainment and what will bring them in. It's the same logic that got you, for example, Coolio in the episode Or and Or of Space Above and Beyond, which is Fox desperately reaching into the darkness and trying to find something that would make kids watch it. Because it's worth noting that Kiss were, I believe, in the middle of something close to a Kiss-Renaissance? Is that what we'll call it?
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at wemadethispod.